Hi, and welcome back to this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point AFR Talk. I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, and amiable host. The program is Focal Point. The network is the American Family Radio Talk Network, AFR Talk. Honored to welcome to our decision maker line Twila Brase, who is our go-to guru or guru-S on all things related to Obamacare and the health industry in America in general. She is the president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and she also produces the daily 60-second commentary you hear right here on Focal Point every day, the Health Freedom Minute. Twila, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Yes, glad to be here. Thanks, Brian.
Well, Twila, just wanted to take a couple of minutes. I don't know that I'll be able to keep you for the entire segment, but you have issued a statement on one of the executive orders that President Obama issued. I've talked at length about this on the program. The executive order that President Obama issued, which he calls a clarification. We want to clarify that there's nothing in Obamacare that would prevent medical professionals from asking questions of their patients about guns. Now, what is your response to that?
Well, first of all, I just think it's kind of interesting that if it's law already that it doesn't have to happen, why would he have to go so far as to do an executive order, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the deal about what I think is the concern here. It doesn't say in Obamacare specifically that a doctor can't ask. It's really about the Secretary of Health and Human Services saying that nothing in the law allows it to happen. There's no authority for her to collect any information on ammunition and guns, and there's also no requirement for individuals to say anything. But here's the bottom line. We're talking about patients and doctors, and patients are a patient because they have something wrong. They have a need. They're vulnerable to the physician, to the clinic at that point because they are in a needy spot. They have a need that they need. They have a need to be fulfilled by the doctor, and here, if what they're doing to this patient is asking them to provide this information, the patient may feel pressured to provide this information in order to, one, not make his doctor angry at him, or two, to get the kind of care that's needed, or three, just to comply and, have everything be peaceful. So it's a pressurized situation, and it's not good for the president to be talking in a way that would put the patient in this kind of a situation when what they're really there for is to have some kind of medical need met.
Now, you quote from the Obamacare Act itself, the Patient Privacy and Affordable Care Act, and this is Section 2714. I don't know where, this is like 2,000 pages into this thing, wasn't it, Twila? I mean, this was just buried deep in there.
It's deep in there. I don't know if it's 2,000 pages in, but it's deep.
But you quote from it. Here it says, no individual shall be required to disclose any information under any data collection activity authorized under Obamacare is my term, or any amendment made by that act relating to, number one, the lawful ownership or possession of a firearm or ammunition, or two, the lawful use, possession, or storage of a firearm or ammunition. So it looks to me like what you're saying, Twila, is basically is the president is kind of pushing a Mack truck through a loophole here. It just says that no individual is going to be required to disclose, but it doesn't stop a doctor from being required to ask.
It doesn't prohibit a doctor from being allowed to ask, I would say. So there's nothing in here that requires a doctor to ask, but there's nothing in here that prohibits a doctor from asking. And the other thing that's really important is it says under this act. So there's lots of other acts out there, right? Right?
So what you're saying is that's another loophole he would exploit. They can come up with another act, and we can give doctors all the freedom they want to probe into whether you've got guns and ammunition at home.
Right. I mean, and I think this is a power differential here, right? So no individual is required to disclose, and that's all fine and dandy. But then if you're, as a president, encouraging doctors to ask, then you're actually encouraging doctors to do what you've already given patients the right not to do. So this is a power situation here that he's exploiting.
Well, it seems to me, Twila, we were talking about this morning in our production meeting, that Rob Gardner, my director, said, look, this isn't about gun control. This is about people control. That's what this whole thing is really all about. And this seems to be sort of another instance of really trying to control people and pry into places where government's got no right to be.
Right, and I think this combined with the whole thing of mental health reporting is going to make the doctor's office a very scary place for patients to be. And if you have any kind of a mental health condition, I mean, this can be just simple anxiety. It can be depression from some situation in your life. Suddenly you're going to realize that the physician or the clinic can report you to the government, and then it will strip away your right, your legal right to have a gun if that's what you want. And, you know, for all anybody knows, there could be, you know, an abusive husband, and that's why you're depressed, right?
Well,
and
you know, and Twila, we were thinking about this too. If you have, you know, psychiatrists or MDs, they're doctors. So, you know, I'm wondering about the liability for these mental health professionals that are being expected to rat out their patients that they think could be on the edge. Maybe they don't have a reason to believe it, but they think they could be or maybe have the capacity to be. And then they don't report them, and then somebody goes out, one of their patients goes out and shoots somebody and shoots up a theater, and the authorities come back to them and said, look, you had an obligation to tell us about this guy, and you didn't do it. We're going to sue you and the family. And we're already seeing that with the victims of the shooter in Aurora, that his psychiatrist is already being sued before this thing has even been, before these executive orders even been rolled out. Well, he is a mental health professional being sued for not ratting out a patient.
Well, see, and I think that's such a problem. I was reading the National Public Radio interview of a therapist because New York has a law that requires the therapist to report if it seems reasonably likely. And as this therapist was saying, you know, you just can't have any idea what people are going to actually end up doing. And so here, when a court comes, you know, after the fact, they will look and say, well, certainly it must have been reasonably likely, and so therefore the therapist is at fault for not reporting, when in fact, you know, the court wasn't there. They couldn't see that. Nobody could see anything. And so I think what that means is that what you're going to have is doctors and therapists and nurses and everyone else reporting all of these people, lots of people, for anything that might get them in trouble.
It's just kind of like doing all these unnecessary tests to protect themselves against a malpractice suit. They're going to, the mental health professionals going to do the same thing. Let's just report everybody so we're covered.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. They will have to do it. It's a defensive position.
Absolutely. Well, last question, Twila. What should people do? How should they respond if they go to a doctor and the doctor starts probing about guns in the home? What would you advise them to do?
Well, there are two different ways that the probing usually happens. One is an actual question, and the other one is a questionnaire. And so I always encourage people never to fill out the questionnaires. I mean, if there's something they want to do about their actual healthcare condition and why they're there, they might want to fill out that one thing. But I don't encourage people to fill out the questionnaire at all. Then if the nurse comes in and says, well, I actually have to have these questions answered, you can just say, I'm not answering any of those questions. And then we don't get into just the guns. Now, if the doctor actually says to you as part of the questioning, you know, do you have a gun at home? You can, you know, there are choices here, right? You can say no, even if you have one. You can say, I'm not comfortable answering that question. You know, you can say, the law tells me I don't have to answer that question. You know, and then there can be suppositions made about why you aren't answering the question, right? You're just guilty. Just because, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is not a question that should be asked. And so, you know, people have to go to the exam room and thinking about this. And that's a sad statement of fact, that you should go to the exam room wondering how you're going to answer a gun question.
Well, let's restate this, and I thank Twila for bringing this to our attention. This is an exact quote from the Health Care Act, Obamacare. No individual shall be required to disclose any information regarding the lawful ownership or possession of a firearm or ammunition, or the lawful use, possession, or storage of a firearm or ammunition. Dr. Ask, you do not have to disclose any information whatsoever.
And we will have that on our website, the actual language of the law. It's going up almost as we speak.
All right. And Twila, tell us how people can get more information and stay in touch with what your organization's up to.
Yes, it's cchfreedom.org. And if you want to stay up to date, we have a weekly email newsletter that they can sign up for right at the top of the homepage, cchfreedom.org.
Our guest has been Twila Brase, president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Let me start. President of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. She's also responsible for the Health Freedom Minute that you hear each day here on Focal Point. Twila, thanks for coming in and giving us your perspective and your expertise. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Twila Brase, President of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Now, let's see if we can wedge in a soundbite or two. Let's grab clip 2. I mean, this is just absolutely shameless. Well, now, why don't we start with Governor Christie? Let's start with Governor Christie. This is clip 3. Governor Christie getting on the NRA's case for using kids in this debate. Now, remember, NRA, they didn't use the president's kids. They were talking about your kids. They were talking about your kids. The president's kids have armed security at their school. Wasn't talking about Secret Service. Talking about where they go to school, they've got armed security. Are your kids less important than the president's kids? Not saying anything about the president's kids. Not saying it's bad that they have armed security. What they were saying is it's hypocritical for the president to be glad that his kids have armed security at their school and is trying to keep you from having armed security for your children at their school. And here is Chris Christie, who is turning out to be a closet Democrat.
And my children had no choice, realistically, in what I decided to do with my career and what effect that's had on their lives in making them somewhat public figures and making them subject to protection from the Executive Protection Unit. My kids don't have a choice about that. And to talk about the president's children or any public officer's children who have, not by their own choice, but by requirement, to have protection, and to use that somehow to try to make a political point, I think is reprehensible. Don't be dragging people's children into this. It's wrong. And I think it demeans them. And it makes them less of a valid, trusted source of information on the real issues
that confront this debate. So that's Governor Christie, and I'll just set up the soundbite I'm going to play for you when we get back of videos that are actually on the White House website. So Chris Christie says it's reprehensible to drag kids into this debate. Back in 2. Stay with us. Focal Point AFR Talk.